This is a Dreamcast disc and is for use only on a Dreamcast unit. Playing this disc on a hi-fi or other audio equipment can cause serious damage to its speakers.
Dreamcast, up to 6 billion players.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
Why don't we play together?
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go!
Please stop this disc now.
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Dreamcast Junkyard Dream Pod. My name is Tom, and this evening I am joined by my good friend Mike.
Hello, Tom.
How's it going? All right?
Not too bad at all.
Excellent. And we are joined by the newest member of the Dreamcast Junkyard team. His name is Ross. He's all the way in Japan. Hi, Ross.
Hey guys, nice to finally be able to speak to you.
Ross, it's actually a pleasure to actually hear your voice for the first time ever, because I've read your articles and I'm very impressed. And you know, you're obviously quite active on the Facebook group and on the page. But
yeah, a little too active, I think.
This is actually the first time we've conversed in person. So
I've had the pleasure of hearing your voice many times, but yeah, first time you've heard mine.
I think pleasure is probably being too nice.
Yeah.
To be honest. Thank you very much for listening and downloading this episode or listening on the internet. Again, this is episode 26 of the Dream Pod. And we'll begin as we always do by talking about things that we've picked up or played, either Dreamcast or otherwise, in the last in the gulf of time since our last episode. It's been about two or 3 weeks since our last one, and I've certainly picked up a few things and played a few things. I'll begin with you though, Mike. I want to know what you've been playing on the Dreamcast or on current or other retro systems.
Dreamcast, I've played a game which I've invented myself called repackaging Japanese games that I buy in bulk. So I got a bundle of 97 Dreamcast games, and I've been
Sorry, 97?
97.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so there was an auction on eBay for 97 Dreamcast games. I was at a retro event. I thought I'd put a cheeky bid in. Came back home and I won it for about 150. So about £1.50 a game.
That's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about 47 games I needed, and the rest I've sort of cannibalised into replacing broken cases. So that's been a fun game to play all week.
Was that the event you were at in Bristol?
Yeah, so there's a local game shop to me in Kingswood in Bristol, run by a friend of mine. Shop's called Ultimately Rare, and they had a retro swap shop, which basically was a few people coming down to swap some games around and buy some games from the shop. It went quite well. It's a very small shop, and quite a few people turned up, so it was a bit odd, but
a bit snug.
Yeah, it was a little bit snug to say the least. Yeah. So I came home from that after not buying anything at the event at all, and bought a massive load of Japanese games. So that was fun. But I've also been playing Dave Mirror in remembrance of the man's passing.
Yeah.
But apart from that, not much on Dreamcast, to be honest with you. I've stayed away from.
Take a step back a second. You said you got 97 Dreamcast
97
games in one bundle. So I'm presuming the vast majority were like worthless, like dating sims and stuff, but were there any gems in there?
Most of them I would say were sort of mid games rather than sort of ones that are completely unplayable. I think there's like 7 or 8 dating sim visual novel type games. Not really that many. And to be honest with you, I'm actually trying to get them at the current time, so that was sort of, for that price, I've been happy with them. But a lot of it was stuff which came out in PAL and North America, so you know, Crazy Taxi, which I hadn't picked up before for some reason. I think gem-wise, I picked up Sonic Adventure International, which I didn't have. I know it's not expensive, but it's not that hard, not easy to get hold of, over here at least. And I think the other ones, there was a couple of other ones in there which were sort of slightly harder to get hold of.
Sounds like a good pickup.
Yeah. It was an excellent pickup. I have to say, until they actually arrived, I didn't think I was going to get it. So it was a good moment to open a massive box.
Yeah, and were they all from the same seller then?
It was one seller, auction on eBay. I thought it'd go for a couple £100 at least just for resale value, but nope. I managed to get it and I was very happy.
Nice one. Anything else, either Dreamcast wise or on current gen or other retro?
Current gen, I haven't bought anything this week. I'm still waiting for my next purchase. Will be Dirt Rally. I know we share a passion for rally games.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So I've been playing Fallout 4, as I have been for some time now.
And you will be doing for the foreseeable future, I would imagine, as well.
A long time, yeah. It's still not my favourite game of the year from last year. That still stands as The Witcher 3, which is one of the greatest games I've made.
Yeah.
But Fallout 4 is starting to definitely come into my top 10 ever, I think.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I'll go next because I think we're going to move on to Ross lastly because we want to give him a bit of an interrogation and a grilling. But as far as current gen stuff in this last week has gone, I've been playing quite a bit of NHL 16. I'm a bit of a closet ice hockey fan, and all the way back to like the Mega Drive era, I've been playing ice hockey games. But yeah, NHL 16 is probably the best one I've ever played, to be honest. It's phenomenal. It looks amazing, plays fantastically. The presentation is unbelievable. Yeah, just really getting into it.
Didn't I read that it has an NFL 94 mode or something in it?
It has an NHL 94 mode, yeah.
What is that?
It's just a control mode. So basically, the default control method is by using the left stick to move your players on the ice, and the right stick.
So it doesn't like switch to 16-bit graphics and go pixelated and stuff, no?
No, that's quite disappointing, to be honest. All it does is it changes the control method from the dual stick mode to the same control mode as it was in the Mega Drive era, but it kind of limits the game because it's not really built for that kind of control system. So you've only got pass, shoot, and kind of like tackle, if you want to call it that. So it kind of it's not the best, to be honest. But yeah, it's just a control method name, really. Other than that, I've been playing Drive Club again because it's just amazing, and they've released an update for it which adds new tracks, which has kind of turned it into probably the closest thing you can get to Project Gotham or Metropolis Street Racer on the PS4 at the moment, because they've added like a new location in the Scotland tracks, which adds all these kind of like city-based like circuits. Other than that, the other game I've been playing on the PS4 has been Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which is possibly my favourite game of last year, just because it left such a massive... Well, it's made such a massive impact on me. I've been thinking about it ever since I finished it. Just an amazing game. It looks fantastic. The storyline is so thought-provoking. I won't go into it in too much depth here, but basically it's an adventure game where you are looking for the reason that everybody in this village has disappeared spontaneously. And it's just amazing. So
no, I've heard good things about it, but every time I hear the name, I can't help but think BioShock. I think that's why I wasn't interested in it when it first came out. For some reason, I thought it had some tie to BioShock, but
yeah.
It doesn't, right? It's nothing to do with BioShock from what I've heard. It's like a town in England or something.
Yeah, it is, yeah. I mean, to be honest, you might quite like it because it'd give you the memories of being back. or maybe that's not what you want. I don't know. It's good to know though. There's no chavs in it, so there's no lines outside the job centre, so that's interesting. Elsewhere, I've been playing on the Retron 5. I got this game. Well, it's not actually a game; it's just a cartridge called 8-Bit Music Power.
I've seen that the Famicom.
Yes,
case thing.
Yes, it's Famicom.
You bought that from Japan, right?
I did. Yes, yeah.
I saw it in a shop in a display case last weekend. After reading I'd never seen it before, and after reading your article, I went into a game shop, and there were two of them there in a display cabinet, and I was like, oh, well, look at that.
Random, very random indeed. So it's basically a chiptune album on a Famicom cartridge. I don't own a Famicom, I own a Retron 5, but it works fine, so that was cool. I've actually heard that it doesn't work in the other one. What's the other?
The Retro Freak.
That's it, yeah, I've heard it doesn't work in the Retro Freak unless you have a patch for it, so if you've got Retro Freak, then download the patch.
No, I stay away from those, but we won't get into that.
Dreamcast-wise, not a great deal. I played a little bit of NHL 2K2 just because I was in NHL mode with 2016 and I wanted to see if my memory was up to standard of what 2K was like. And it's not, so I'm not going to go into that too much. It's still a good game, retro-wise, but one other thing I did pick up though, which I will mention, is I picked up another Dreamcast, and I saw it in a shop with a grand total of £40, and it looked to be in mint condition, and it came with about 6 games. It had like Revolt, 2 copies of MSR, it had 2 pads, 2 VMUs, and it was completely white, not a single spot of yellowing on it. So I had to have it, to be honest. And with all the events and stuff coming up, where we're going to be doing, like, having all the consoles out for people to play on, I thought I need another one just so that.
What number Dreamcast is that?
I think that's number 8 now. So.
Oh, God.
So you can't talk. I've seen your video of your flat.
And I actually just bought a couple more Dreamcasts as well because I saw them really cheap. I put in a few low bids, a seller in Japan, and I got about 3 or 4 more. Because if you remember a while back, I did that future-proofing your Dreamcast article, and a few people commented like, "Oh, look at your yellow Dreamcast."
Oh yes,
whatever. And I pretended like, yeah, I don't care about my yellow Dreamcast, but in reality, I went into a corner and cried, and I was pushed to seek out some with better cases. So I haven't tested them yet, but even if they're broken, I'm just going to swap the cases around, so I've got some nice pure white Dreamcasts that I can be proud of.
On that subject, we shall come to you, Ross. For those people listening to the podcast who've not heard Ross's voice before, like me and Mike, actually, incidentally, Ross joined the Dreamcast Junkyard team about a month ago, and initially started writing guest articles. But just like with Scott, who's our Australian correspondent, shall we say, his articles proved very popular, and his writing style and skill with the old keyboard was clear to see. So we invited him to join the team, and here you are, Ross. So welcome to the Dreamcast Junkyard, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't, to be honest, I'm really not confident about my writing ability. I'm for a fairly poor quality, but I hope that people can see through the bad writing and get some information out of it that they didn't know previously if they take the time to read through.
Those idiots don't know anything, right? So just ignore. No. So, Ross, you are based in Japan, but you're not Japanese.
I'm based in Kurashiki in Japan, yes. It's about halfway between Okayama and Hiroshima, if you're looking on a map.
Oh, and how did you actually be in Japan?
I graduated university, and I'd been studying computing for 4 years, and at the end of that, the one thing I knew was that I don't want to work in computing. I don't want to work in a office. I also wanted to travel. And one of my friends was already out here in Japan and teaching English, and he was always messaging me. He's one of my best friends from a young age, into video games as well. We used to go around the game shops together hunting for games. Anyway, he told me about it and was like, "Oh, you got to come over to Japan. It's awesome here. It's great. Yeah, it's not that difficult to get a job." So I applied for half-heartedly. I applied for a job, a position, not expecting much. And before I knew, the ball got rolling, and I had a phone interview, and a few months later, or half a year later, without really putting much effort into it, I was like, "Oh, I'm in Japan now. Wow, that's all right."
So what year would that have been then?
Oh, that would have been 2010, March, when I first came here. And since then, I've spent about 10 days in the UK. So yeah, I'm out of touch with anything in the UK, pretty much. The other day, my sister sent me a box of stuff for Christmas, and it had a Sonic and Tails figure in, and she messaged me on Facebook, and I said, "Oh, thanks for those, and where did you get them?" And she said, "Oh, I believe it or not, Waterstones." And I was like, Waterstones? That rings a bell. What's that again? So, it's a bookshop. I was like, "Oh yeah, bookshop. Yeah, I remember that."
So what's the Japanese equivalent of Waterstones then?
I don't know, but to be honest, there's bookshops everywhere in Japan. They're far more common than England. There's no equivalent of.
I almost did a really offensive Japanese accent just saying Waterstones, but I held back at the last minute.
Waterstones. But that's not offensive. That's how they actually would pronounce it. If it was
exactly.
if it was put into katakana, I mean, that's how they'd pronounce it. That's how it'd be written.
Mine would be slightly more offensive. Anyway, moving on slightly. You are clearly a collector of not just Dreamcast stuff, but just retro gaming stuff in general.
Collecting's a nice way of putting it. Hoarder, probably more appropriate.
Can you just explain your collection, how big your collection is, what kind of stuff you've got in your heap?
I've been collecting games, since I was a kid. I never throwing away my games, so I've been collecting from then. I got a DC on launch day in the UK, and shortly after I got my first part-time job, and back then, when you had no responsibilities money-wise, I'd just always be picking up games. Spent most of my student loans on video games.
Likewise.
Built up a big collection in the UK, and then when I came to Japan, I just sold it all. And I came to Japan, I thought, all right, I don't need a video game collection. And I didn't for about a year and a half. And then slowly and gradually it started increasing again. It's got to a situation where I've got probably around 2,000 games, I think, for almost every mainstream system you can think of and a few others. My big thing's Sega, obviously, so everything from SG-1000 and Mark III. I don't know, do you guys know about SG-1000 and Mark III?
Yeah. I mean, Scott Marley,
yeah,
big fan. He's quite a big fan of the SG-1000, so he's constantly trying to drop that into conversations where everyone just ignores it.
Yeah.
So
Scott collects and seems to be interested in a lot of the same things as me. I think his collection is what mine would be like if I had the money to do it. But yeah, maybe about a year and a half or 2 years ago, I've got to give him a shout out. This guy called Soft Otaku. He's on Facebook, SOFT Otaku, OTAKU. He was advertising on a local Japanese sale group that he had 3 arcade cabinets. He was moving house and he needs to get rid of them. And I was like, oh, I'll take. He had a Neo Geo cab of some sort, a Sega Astro City and a Sega New Net City, and they were all free. And I was like, I'll take that Astro City off you. And I was like, you don't want anything for it? And he's like, no, nothing at all. You can have it and just pay postage. So all I had to pay was less than £100 for postage to my house, and I got a arcade cabinet. So I was dead chuffed about that.
You also collect the Atomic Wave stuff as well?
Yes, I've got Atomic Wave, Naomi 2, Sega STV. The Sega STV was kind of like the equivalent of the Naomi, like what the Naomi is to the Dreamcast, the STV is to the Sega Saturn. They're almost identical hardware. It's what Radiant Silvergun, Virtua Fighter Kids, Virtua Fighter Remix, Die Hard Arcade. It's what they were released on in the arcades.
Some of the stuff that you've written about on the Junkyard already has been quite sort of well received, quite popular. Certainly the expanding the Dreamcast collection stuff, where you actually go on about the different arcade heritages of the Dreamcast. You're obviously a fan of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I've got a few more to get through yet. It's quite a big family, the Dreamcast family.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things that you've covered so far, certainly as I'm concerned anyway, is the CSK article that you did. For those people who don't know, CSK Holdings were they like a major shareholder in Sega at one point? Or
yes, and they are a huge conglomerate in Japan, and I think I've forgotten the exact year, but in the 80s, in the second half of the 80s, they bought out Sega entirely and then put them on the stock market in Tokyo. So they are what made Sega a publicly traded company.
For those of us who are quite sort of into Sega history and fans of Sega, this is, I wouldn't say common knowledge, but it's well known within certain circles. But for the vast majority of casual people who don't know anything about the inner workings of certain organizations, that is completely unknown. And one of the most interesting things about this whole connection with CSK Holdings is is it the Denpo? The Dreamcast?
Kenpo.
Sorry, yeah, the CSK Kenpo Dreamcast, which, I mean, I'd heard of and I'd seen images of, and I knew that it was basically just a standard Dreamcast with a sticker on it. But I don't know, Ross, if you want to just basically talk a little bit about that, because it's something that is not very well documented, certainly in the West anyway. So, the Denpo system. Go ahead.
Kenpo.
Sorry, Kenpo. Sorry, Jesus.
No, to be honest, I'd never heard of it until you messaged me, and I was like, "Wow, that sounds interesting." So I got researching in English first. Like you said, there wasn't anything really. I found one forum post, I think, and that was it. So then I started searching in Japanese, and there are a fair few news articles from around the time that are still online. Reporting on it. It's also mentioned in the CSK Kenpo, what would you call it? They have I can't remember what year, but like a 50th or 60th, 70th anniversary pamphlet about their history.
Like a newsletter type thing, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a digital PDF. It mentions it briefly in that, and what it basically was a Dreamcast built for the purpose of loaning to CSK employees, people who were insured. This is well, I should start from the beginning. Really, CSK Kempo is a health insurance company that employees of CSK are mostly, I think, I don't know exactly, are mostly signed up to. So anyone who was paying for CSK Kempo insurance could get or could apply for one of these special Kempo Dreamcasts. It comes with a webcam. I think that's about it, really. It comes with a webcam, keyboard, and maybe mouse. And it allowed people at the time to have consultations with their doctor. I'm sure if you're having a heart attack or whatever, you wouldn't lock in on your Dreamcast. But I think for like more general stuff, like talking about your diet and things like that, they used it for. You know. But I can't find a single picture of anyone actually using it with their doctor. But they were distributed, and the service was all there. So I'm sure it happened. Maybe only 2% of people who got it used it. Probably most people were like, "Oh, Dreamcast, free Dreamcast. Oh, I'll apply for that. Yeah, so I can talk to my doctor. That's right." Maybe they just got it and used it as a Dreamcast. But the service was definitely up, and so I'm sure that at least some were used for that purpose.
Fascinating. I mean, just the actual notion of using your console to actually talk to your doctor back in like the late 90s is just a fascinating concept. And like you say, you can't actually imagine trying to do it here in the UK. You probably, after getting through Dream Arena for about half an hour, you'd get to like some snotty receptionist. What's your problem? Why do you need to see a doctor? Like, fuck off! Just ripping the cable out of the wall and kicking the Dreamcast through a window.
Then you'd be in the virtual waiting room, getting charged 6p a minute on dial-up.
Yeah, and then the junior doctors would strike. Topical.
So yes, the strike, the junior doctors strike. More about that topic. No, let's move on, I think.
So yeah, thanks very much for sharing with us your expertise. You're obviously very learned when it comes to the Dreamcast and games in general. So yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on board, and we'll obviously be picking your brains and looking forward to more articles from you in the future, Ross. So
great, look forward to it.
Now we'll move on slightly, and we'll bring you back in, Mike, because this kind of involves you. The next topic, and that is the fact that the Dreamcast Junkyard Ultimate Collector's Guide is back from the dead. Yes, it's back from the dead. Yeah. It's not available on sale on the internet just yet, but what I wanted to say is that the Dreamcast Junkyard will be attending the Retro Collect video game market in early March in Doncaster. We will be there in person, and we will be selling the new and updated version of the Dreamcast Junkyard Ultimate Collector's Guide, the book that Sega wanted to ban. It's back. It's back. We've got a new cover. It says 100% unofficial. It's updated. Mike, can you tell us how it's new, how it's different from the old version?
Well, it's not that different. It's not a revolution. It's not a revolution in content. It's just basically updated to have everything which is being released since. So you've got Leona's, you've got I don't remember if Fruity was in the last one. I think Fruity was in the last one. Leona's, PS Solar's on it as well, and quite a bit of corrections on a few little mistakes that were in the first one, as I suppose is to be expected with 1,700 games nearly. There was a couple of code errors, so they've all been corrected. Just basically sort of updated and made it a bit more definitive than it was before.
Basically like sort of general housekeeping, like errors removed, basically brought bang up to date. I've had a quick flick through it, and yeah, it's as good as the old version was. Better, really. What can I say? It's just more up to date. That's the only thing. I mean, I have said to people have asked me on like the Facebook group and on Twitter, What's new? Do I need to rebuy this one? And I have been honest and I said, look, if you bought the old version or the first version, you probably don't need this one because it's basically just a redux, as it were. And we have discussed making. Sorry.
That's a bad subject, Tom. Let's not bring Junkyard into the conversation today.
In the traditional sense of a redux, we have discussed the possibility of giving people the opportunity to download the PDF of those who have actually bought the original version. So, watch this space, and that could be a possibility in the future.
It's the PDF for the updated file. Like I said, if you've got the first copy, you don't need the new one. Obviously, it's printed for you, so you haven't got to worry about printing off all the pages and then having to re-put all your games in again if you have done that. But yeah, it's just basically improved.
Did you find any errors or mistakes from the first edition that were changed or anything like that?
When I sort of did the first guide, I sent a copy to Tom several months before, and that had quite a few errors in it. I changed all them, and I must have missed about 20, 30. There's a couple of code errors, so a few of the Japanese games I put the wrong codes in, wrong numbers, in the wrong order. A couple of other games I noticed that I listed with limited editions that were the wrong codes. So the first print editions have a code which is different I put in. But nothing major.
If anything, that makes the original edition even more collectible.
I hear it's going for £1,000 online now, Tom. It's a collector's piece.
I haven't even read it, so I'm not saying there were lots of errors. I just wondered if that was one of the improvements of the new version, if it was...
I think for yourself, in Japan, I think you're going to probably see more errors than some of us would, because I've got to be honest with you, I'm not a fluent Japanese speaker. I'll rephrase that. I can't speak Japanese at all. I have no idea. I am completely blind when it comes to speaking Japanese. So I've gone on translations from websites, and they differ so much. I've taken what I think is the right one. So hopefully there's no major errors in it. But I'm always welcome to feedback. I'm sure we'll have a link at some point, and they can give me some feedback if people do see any errors.
Yeah, I'll be sure to give you some feedback, yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Page 79, you said it was called Biz. It's not called that, it's called Biz.
So I thought that was going to happen. When we first released it, I thought people were going to go, oh, this is all wrong, and that's all wrong. But we haven't had that much. Well, I've had no feedback at all, I think.
Mike, no feedback is good feedback. When it comes to the internet, no feedback is good feedback.
That's true. Well, we had feedback from Sega, but let's not
That was like a big bitch slap.
It was a little bit, yeah.
You're one step above Project Dream, then, if Sega have at least acknowledged your existence.
Sorry. Controversial subjects. So who cast in Dreamcast 2? That's going to be an interesting podcast tonight. I think it's not a secret that eventually we are planning to hopefully produce an expanded book. I know it's been mentioned a couple of times. I've already written several sections to add, and that's sort of, I know myself and Tom have been talking about it for quite a while now. So I think the best thing to do is watch this space when it comes to a proper revised and expanded edition, which will be beneficial to have a second copy of.
That's not just like kind of really writing off the new version of the guide, because this thing that we're talking about is a completely different thing, totally. So if you're listening to this now and you're wondering whether or not you should buy the new version of the book, you need it. Because the new version is not the same thing, so we don't want to say too much at the moment, but no, we'll leave it at that for now. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic of discussion, and we shall begin again. Those people who lived in the UK in the mid to late 90s, you will more than likely be familiar with a thing called teletext. And on teletext, there was a service called Digitiser. And Digitiser was very popular. It was it was a self-styled magazine that was the only updated daily magazine in the world, which in the time before the internet was was correct, really. I used to tune in daily. Did you guys remember Digitiser? Did you read it at all?
I remember it. I didn't read it that much, but I remember it well.
I went through phases of reading it religiously every day and then forgetting about it for a few months and reading it again. I loved it, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I loved the style of humour was just like right up my street.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it was one of the main things that really influenced me in wanting to be a games journalist and wanting to write about games in general, to be honest. However, Mr. Biffo, Paul Rose, who is the mastermind behind Digitiser, wrote an article on his new resurrection site of Digitiser, which is digitiser2000.com, entitled Sega Can Rot. That's the name of the article. And I posted that onto our Facebook group this week, and it got quite a few people talking. And I just wanted to kind of touch on the points that he made in the article and just ask what you guys thought of it. Basically, the general gist of it is that Sega were a force to be reckoned with, and that they should have used their back catalogue to greater effect than they have to be more like relevant than they are currently in the industry. Ross, I know you were quite vocal into this topic.
Yeah, I'm inclined to maybe agree with him, to be honest. I'm starting to lose hope, as sad as it is. In the last 5 years, what have we really had? Sonic Generations, I loved. Also, Sega Extreme. Oh, what was it called? Sonic and Sega All Stars.
Oh yeah, Transformed. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that. That is probably the best Sega game that came out last generation. That and perhaps Afterburner. Not Afterburner, but
Afterburner Climax.
Transformed is not even a Sega game. Sega didn't make it. Sumo Digital did, and they also made was it Sega? The tennis game, was it Sega
Superstars
Tennis? Yeah, they also made that again, which was another quality game. And if a small no disrespect to Sumo Digital, they're probably one of my favorite developers at the moment, but they're not a huge, or they weren't before they started making these games. They weren't a huge development studio. And if a smallish or smaller scale development studio in the UK can outdo Sega tenfold, then yeah, I'd be inclined to say I'd rather Sega either sell off their assets or start licensing them out to other developers, because they're just doing nothing with them at the moment. And the least they could do is not for us fans, do it for us fans or anything like that. For themselves, they're not doing anything with them. Why not license? It's not like Nintendo where their properties are really valuable to them. They're very careful with them. They've already screwed up all these IPs, most of them, multiple times. Why not license them out to some developers who want to take them and make a few bucks? And maybe some of them will be bad, but some of them, I'm sure, like the Sumo Digital games, would be fantastic. So
I mean, I kind of agree with you, Ross, to be honest. But I mean, I kind of wish that Aaron had been on the podcast tonight, because he is of the opposite kind of stance. So it would have been quite a good discussion, and a lot of his points are very valid.
Yes, and there have been some good games, like the Hatsune Miku games and Yakuza games, a fairly high quality, but they're not the Sega games from my generation that I would like to see. I mean, I do like Yakuza, but it is a bit milks, that franchise. Like, there's Yakuza 1 to 5, then there's Yakuza 0, there's the 2 set in medieval Japan times, there's 2 on the PSP, then there's 2 remakes, there's another medieval one coming out soon. You know, unless all you play is Yakuza, then you're gonna lose track of where the franchise is, and not really be. It's quite a difficult high entry point to get into it now. There's so many of them.
I think a lot of people have also kind of made a nod towards the output that Sega have put onto like the Nintendo consoles, certainly the 3DS and the Wii U. So I mean, I don't own either of those consoles, but if I did, then I would own all of the classics.
In Japan, we've had two of those classic collection. What do you call them? Carts, SDs, whatever you call a 3DS card. We've had 2 of those collections, hard copies, and I bought them both, and I do love them. But I've already played those games so much, and I'm not a big portable gamer, to be honest. It's just something to pass the time when I'm on a flight, going on holiday, or on a train or something. They're not games I can really sink my teeth into much because I've already played them so much. And to be honest, I'd rather, even though they're 3D and the effect is nice and it's great, and I'm not putting them down, they are fantastic, but I would rather play on my CRT or my modern TV with one of the like full screen arcade perfect versions on Saturn or Dreamcast, to be quite honest. So I find it difficult to get too excited about them, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I mean, going back to the original like point of the article, what Mr. Biffo goes on to say is that we come from an age when Sega kind of like ruled the roost. You know, we had games like Streets of Rage, you know, Super Hang On, all these amazing games, Knights, you know, Sega Rally. Where have they gone? You know, if you look at Sega's kind of website now, all they've kind of got is Football Manager and like Total War and that kind of thing. I mean, where have all these classic IPs gone?
That's the thing, not those IPs, but here in Japan in the arcades, there are plenty of new Sega games that I think probably, even you guys who are hardcore Sega fans, you may not have even heard of them. Stuff like Operation Ghost, the sequel to the Ghost Squad games, Sega Racing Classic, which was the remake of Daytona, which is in the arcades here, and is actually the version that was ported to the 360. So maybe you've heard of that one.
Okay. No.
What else? There are a few others. I can't even think of them. Transformers Human Alliance, which is obviously a licensed Transformers game with huge, massive, vibrating guns. Really exciting, really good stuff. Shows that Sega still can make a really good light gun game.
At this point, can I just quickly ask you? I mean, if you go to like your nearest city, is there still a presence of arcades?
Oh yeah, and Sega arcades. You will see big lit up Sega signs in big cities that are arcades. That even in Okayama, which is the closest big city to me, it has on one road there are two giant Sega signs, two different Sega arcades on the same road. And even in Kurashiki, which is on the smaller scale of cities in Japan, which is where I live, we have how many? We have at least one or two Sega branded arcades, and there are plenty of new Sega games. I mean, anyone who's listening to this, go in, type in Sega arcade games, and take a look at the stuff they've been making over the last few years. There are plenty of examples of really good arcade games. Sega haven't lost it; they're still making good arcade games, but they're just not putting any effort into selling them or getting them into arcades in the US or the UK, and they're not bothering to port any of them to home systems, which is really sad in my opinion.
I think the translation is slightly lost because in the UK, certainly these days, arcade to a lot of people means one of those places where alkies go to like put 10p into slot machines, or you know, the only big signs I see on the high street where I live in Southampton is Poundland, or do you know what I mean? Poundland or Vodafone. There's no Sega signs. Nowhere.
Yeah, well, maybe I wouldn't recommend Sega investing too heavily in
Southampton
in English arcades, but I mean. Unlike some people out there on the internet, I don't want to pretend I know more than Sega about how to
is that another slide
to take the company.
Is that another slide?
No, not at all. But at least some ports. You know, the games are already made. They're built. They're running on PC based hardware. Very easy to port over. You know, I don't know the details about it, but it's not difficult to port something based on PC hardware over to another console, which is PC based hardware, Xbox One or PS4. They could whack them onto the Xbox Store or PS Plus Store. Maybe they wouldn't warrant hard copy releases, but I think they'd sell if they charge like £8 or $10 or something like that per game, or even if they bundled a few up into a collection.
The Dreamcast collection
that they'd sell anyway.
Mm. I mean, somebody else did make a point on the Facebook page or the Facebook group even that things like Jet Set Radio didn't sell at all. I mean, I bought it on the. I was looking at my Vita the other day, and I was just like, so many Sega games on my Vita. I've got not necessarily Sega produced, but ones that were on the Dreamcast. So I've got like Power Stone, Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio. The list goes on. I've got so many Dreamcast related games on my Vita.
Did you pay for Jet Set Radio, or did you get it free with
No, I paid
PS
for it.
Plus?
No, I paid for it.
I got it free with PS Plus. I mean, that's still paying for it in a way. Sega is still getting a cut from that, but I didn't actually buy it outright.
Mike, what about you? What's Bristol like for Sega arcades? And they're like,
We have no arcades. No, we have no arcades. We do, but they're not places you want to go. I think I've listened to both of you. I think I've sort of fall down on Ross's side of things quite a lot. I think in the UK, it's frustrating that Sega aren't using their franchises as well as they should, because consumer digital games are amazing. I love both the racing games and tennis. I love them all. I completed all of them. They were brilliant games. And Nintendo are so good at using their franchises, and people love them in this country. Look at the Amiibos and stuff. But I grew up and no one had Nintendos. There's this almost seems to be this situation where people are remembering the past from reading American articles.
Yes. I thought the same thing before.
Yeah, people like people buying. Someone was the other day. Someone was in a game shop and they were buying the. I think they were talking about, is it Ice Climber, the NES game? Is it Ice Climber? I'm sure it's Ice Climber. And they were like talking about it being a great game and stuff. No one played that when I was growing up. Everyone was playing the Master System. Everyone was playing, Alex Kidd. Everyone was playing all those great Master System games. And it seems to be that we've just gone and followed the Americans to an extent and just bought into their nostalgia rather than our own. Don't get me wrong, Sega at the current time, I know that in the West they don't have particularly great franchises of their own. In actual fact, looking at it, the best games they have are made by UK developers. Total War is a fantastic series. Football Manager has taken up way too much of my time. I can't even begin to say. But they're not Sega games.
No, I agree.
They're not. Sega's bright skies. It's colourful. It's fun, and they're just. It's almost It's almost like they don't want to actually use their franchise and actually. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's almost like they're too worried about trying to bring new concepts and new sort of popular games into their own brand, rather than sort of use the games that worked so well in the past.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, just to use that as an example, can you imagine the Sega of now introducing something like Knights? It would never happen.
Well,
no, exactly.
If you think about it, though, this is the thing that really differentiates Sega from Nintendo. I mean, Nintendo's franchises, back to the 80s with Donkey Kong, they've been using those same franchises every generation, updates, rebirths of these IPs. Whereas Sega, on the other hand, if you actually think about it, look at each generation. Look at the SG-1000 and the Mark III, the Mega Drive, the Saturn, the Dreamcast. There's very few IPs that have actually gone from one generation to the next. I mean, on the SG-1000 and Mark III, the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Monaco GP. That's the only one. There may be a couple others, but
there's things like Virtual Racing, which were on the Mega Drive 32X and the Saturn, but I don't think that's really
but those are just ports, and that's still kind of the third. I know it's on the Mega Drive, but with that chip in it, it's still kind of. I know it's not technically, but it's still kind of the same generation, released around the same time. It's just a port of the same game.
And you only have to look at how the sort of the press online when they announced that Alex Kidd was going to be in, I think Sega Superstars Tennis would be in the first one. People went absolutely ballistic about the fact that he was in the game, because it was like everyone remembers Alex Kidd growing up. Everyone remembers Miracle World, and it seems to be that it's almost like I want Sega to release a sort of an amiibo style thing and see how many people actually want to buy that, because I think people would. I think people. I work in a shop. I work in resale, and I work in a major chain, which will go unnamed. But we sell the only Sega things we sell, apart from Sonic branded bikes, which are bizarre. We sell the Mega Drive, the Mega Drive handheld Mega Drives, and the plug-in to TV ones. And the amount of people who come in and buy them it's unbelievable because they all remember the Mega Drive. They all have memories of Sega, but yet there's no way of them actually reliving that on an actual mainstream console. This is why we have so much passion on the internet about Dreamcast 2. People have such good nostalgia about Sega in general, and Sega aren't actually. They're not taking our money. You know what I mean? They're not actually trying to sell us the things we want.
I mean, we should really kind of wrap this section up now. But sorry, Ross, did you have another point?
Yes, I did, but
go ahead.
I've lost it. No, I've lost it. It's gone.
No worries. Basically, all I was going to say was we kind of wrap this one up now. But I just wanted to ask the final question, just going back to the original point of the section, the article that Mr. Biffo wrote even. Should Sega rot? Should Sega rot?
You're asking Sega fanboys.
Disappear? I say no. It's a stupid question. I apologise for asking it, but yeah.
No, it's not. It's not a stupid question. It's a question which I think we all think.
Is Sega relevant then?
No,
they're not relevant.
Not in the West.
In Japan, they are to an extent, especially with Yakuza and the Hatsune Miku games and the arcades, but they're nothing compared to their former self. And sorry, I remembered the point. The point I was going to make was, on the Dreamcast, we didn't care that there was no new Golden Axe or new Streets of Rage. I don't remember anyone back then moaning and saying, while they were playing Space Channel 5 and Sonic Adventure and Shenmue and all these great games, I don't remember anyone saying, what are Sega doing? Why aren't they releasing a new Golden Axe game? The difference is that now they don't have the money to put into these new franchises that they used to make each generation, and if they can't do it themselves, I'd rather them.
They have no ideas. Yeah. On the Dreamcast, they had ideas. You know, so many new franchises. What do they have now?
Yep.
Okay, guys, we'll move on now to the next part of the podcast, and that is to talk about a particular game, and that is Acclaim's Vanishing Point. Guys, have you played this one? Do you know anything about it?
I have.
What about yourself, Ross?
I did last night.
Excellent. So you're quite a newcomer then to the old Vanishing Point mold.
Yeah, it didn't grab my attention back in the day.
No worries. Well, in December 2000, IGN said, "It's not just racing, it's a driving simulation so advanced and authentic, it'll drive you mad. Comprehensive vehicle dynamics based on a collaboration with industry engineers, authentically licensed cars with the most advanced 3D driving engines ever developed. Is your mind ready for this much reality?"
Yeah, I'd say they hit the nail on the head right now.
It's a great write-up. I'm not quite sure who paid them to do it, but
for those people who have never played Vanishing Point, it's not based on the movie. Well, it's a game from Clockwork Games and published by Acclaim in 2000. And the one thing that I remember from this game specifically was the fact that apparently there was no pop-up. And if you look at the PlayStation game and you look at the engine, then it's quite impressive. But if you look at the Dreamcast game, it's not really that impressive because no Dreamcast games really have any pop-up. But that said, I've kind of made a bit of an error here. The most impressive thing that was muted as the thing to sell Vanishing Point was the physics engine that was brought in. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but pretty sure the development team roped in quite a large squad of like scientists and things from a pretty prestigious university in the UK to develop this centrifugal handling mechanic, and that's where I think the game kind of went wrong because they put so much effort into this handling engine.
Yeah. It controls slightly oddly, I think is the best way of describing it. I read an interview with, I think the interview you posted.
Yeah, it was an interview with Neil Cassini. He was the head developer at Clockwork Games. And yeah, he went into quite some detail. I will put the link to the interview notes to the episode. But
yeah, which it's I've played Vanishing Point before. I'm looking at the review I actually did of it several years ago. It's one of those odd games on Dreamcast that it doesn't quite feel right. It's almost like they're trying to. They've got a good idea. They've got a good nucleus and idea, but they haven't really built that much around it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying lots about content because the game's just full of content. It's quite impressive, but it feels like they've had an idea, they've ran with it, and they've not really looked at how it's turned out before they released it. That's how I get it.
For me, I mean, there's two things here, right? I mean, the first thing is the name. Now, the name Vanishing Point is obviously derived from the fact that the engine enables the game to render such a distance that there is no pop-up, and that was one of the main selling points of the game. The second point is the fact that they use this very advanced physics engine, which I mentioned earlier, to kind of sell the game as this really realistic driving game. But the crux of the matter is this: when you start playing it, it doesn't feel as if you're actually playing a driving simulator, which is what you would expect with that amount of money ploughed into such an engine.
No, it makes an absolutely terrible first impression. Yeah. It's really not a game which you want to. I've seen other reviews on other websites. I think actually the Video Game Critic, which is a site I follow quite a lot, I think he reviewed it, and I think his response was basically, "This is terrible," from playing the first few hours, because you have to unlock stuff. If I'm not, I might be mistaken, but don't you have to unlock the ability to tune?
You do,
car?
yeah. You have to unlock the ability to actually change the settings in your vehicles.
Yeah, which is a novel idea.
Yeah. Which is stupid.
Yeah, I'm sure EA could use that with DLC these days.
Let's go back to the beginning, though. I mean, Vanishing Point is a game released in 2000. It was a simultaneous, almost simultaneous release on the PlayStation and the Dreamcast. On the play, just little bit of background information. The PlayStation version of this game is quite a technical feat because it does feature the aforementioned lack of pop-up, which for anyone who's played a PlayStation game, attest that pop-up is an issue in racing games. Even things like Gran Turismo, the hallowed Gran Turismo 2, has a great deal of pop-up. And for those people who don't know what pop-up is, it's when you're driving down the track and stuff just kind of appears in front of you. Vanishing Point did away with that because what they did was they managed to create a game engine which rendered the entire track in its entirety. So when you were driving around, everything was already created, so nothing would pop into view. So that was the main point of the name Vanishing Point. For the Dreamcast, that wasn't really an issue because it had the ability to not need that amount of over-engineered game engine anyway. So, again, a bit of a moot point. The visuals are still quite impressive. I would say that the car models in Vanishing Point are still probably the best in any Dreamcast racing game.
I thought
F355.
Oh wait a minute! Yes, I didn't think about that. Yeah, so okay, I'll take that one back. I'll keep it in. I won't edit it out, but yeah, fair play.
Le Mans.
Le Mans. That's another good example. Yeah.
Okay, right. I'm gonna snap. Got me. Okay. Okay. The car models are quite good.
They look a bit.
They're better in the Spirit of Speed, at least.
One of the other odd things about the game is the structure. Is the main career mode is, as you would expect. I was certainly expecting this. I can remember first playing it actually, and when you first go into the career mode, you're not confronted with this race around these tracks against these other cars and get as many points as you can. It's kind of like a time trial with other cars on the track at the same time, and it's kind of bewildering at first because you don't actually know what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I saw these cars with arrows above them, and I'd overtake them. I'm like, well, why haven't I gone into... I was in fourth place. Why haven't I gone into third place? What's going on here? And then slowly, after it took me about 3 or 4 races before I realised what was going on. It's just a time trial.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what's the difference between the regular cars and the cars with arrows.
I think the ones with arrows are more aggressive. So they're actually. I think the instruction manual says something along the lines of They're actually racing.
Okay.
So they're going to want to go for the best times, whereas the other ones are sort of casual Sunday drivers getting in your way.
I mean, the best way to kind of describe it is like a rally cross mode in other games where you're doing a rally, but you've got other cars on the track at the same time. So you're trying to get the best split time around the track. And that was just really, really weird when I first played it. And I was just like, why can't I just have a normal race? Why have they done this? You know, it looks great. Well, it looked great at the time, and they had this like physics engine that was, you know, all singing, all dancing, which we'll come to in a minute. Why put such a bizarre racing mode? And I'll be honest with you, the reason I've actually brought this game up to actually describe it or discuss in this episode is because a lot of people have never actually played it or heard of it, and quite aware of the fact that people don't really know that Vanishing Point is a Dreamcast game. It's not a PAL exclusive. It was released in the US, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't released it wasn't released in Japan.
No, it wasn't.
So
but then even MSR wasn't released in Japan.
No, it wasn't. I have played the early Japanese version. That's something for another.
another topic. Yeah, but that was one. Sorry, that was one big shock for me in Japan, though. Just we always think about the Japanese imports and all the games that they get that we don't. But there's actually a large number of titles, Western titles, that don't get released in Japan. And if you look on their version of eBay, basically Yahoo Auctions, there are sellers selling import games from America, just like we're buying Japanese games from Japan. And so, yes, interesting. Sorry.
But you did get the best ones, though, because you did get Spirit of Speed in Japan.
Which
is an essential piece.
And that's actually quite rare. That's not cheap, that
it
game.
Is.
It's like,
there's a listing.
£30 or £20 or something.
There's a listing somewhere that tells you how many copies of every single game were sold in Japan.
Yeah.
And I think it's the least 37 copies.
What?
What?
I'll have to put the actual list up and send it across. But it literally, it's... Because I think Siemens top is like 600,000 or something like that. And I'm sure Spirit of Speed is like 37 copies.
That is awesome.
It's got to be the rarest.
Well, the price I've seen it for, it's not that expensive, though. So if that's the case, I do want to see that list. I know a place to get it. I'm going to buy
them all
it.
up quickly.
All 37.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, with the Dreamcast, it's one of them systems that it seems to be the only like PAL games are rare. You know, in other parts of the world, usually it's for us in like the UK. It's like get all the PALs, get all the Japanese stuff, get all the American stuff. It's better, but it seems to be with the Dreamcast in a lot of senses. You've got a lot of games that weren't released anywhere else, like Headhunter. You know,
Shenmue
exactly.
2.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, it was released in Japan, but the English
version. Again, you know, things like Vanishing Point. You know, there's so many that it's bewildering. You know, was Floygan Brothers released in Japan?
No.
Other one, you know, there's so many that just I don't know about take for granted, but we have at our disposal.
Well, yeah, MD. Sorry, I mean, I'm not talking about specifically PAL with this list. I'm about a few games I'm about to mention. So they were some of them released in the US as well, but like MDK2, Mortal Kombat Gold. Not that they missed that much. I've already Trick Style, MSR,
Magforce Racing.
The Magforce Racing. Hydro Thunder, Trick Style, Toy Commander, and Toy Racer weren't released in Japan.
Yeah, I think Toy
it
Commander
was. Yeah, it was released under a different name though. Was it like Bedroom Commander or something like that?
I'll try and pronounce in Japanese, but it'll sound terrible. I got it. I'm going to cop out. I haven't got it on me. I haven't got the list.
Well,
I think is it Toy Ranger? It's something Toy Ranger.
Really? Well, I've never seen it. But I take your word for it. But I own a fairly large Dreamcast collection. I'm into collecting the games here. I've never seen it anywhere.
And did you say Hydro Thunder as well was not released?
Yeah, Hydro Thunder was not. But well, now I'm questioning myself. But I'm fairly sure it wasn't.
Okay. Going back to the original point, though, Vanishing Point. Anyone got any final thoughts on Vanishing Point, or should it just vanish into the ether?
I'll let you guys go first.
I don't mind it actually. I was playing with a fiance earlier on. She beat me on one race, which I wasn't very happy about. I think her description of it was it had nice balls. I'm not entirely sure if that's a compliment or not.
My final thoughts are that I don't like the handling. They've put that much effort into the handling. Why does it feel like everything is on the moon? And I think, Ross, didn't you have something mentioned about this?
Yes, I do. When I first turned this game on and started playing it, I thought it was appalling, and I wasn't even sure if you were really going to feature it in this episode, or if it was just a stitch-up for the new guy, like ruin the guy's Friday night by making him play a crappy Dreamcast game. But and you're right about the moon physics, where it's like sliding all over the place, out of control. But there's a trick that I can't take credit for. I learned it from an episode of GameSack. I don't know if you know those guys on YouTube.
Yeah.
So they were playing Daytona USA 2001, and that's another game that's renowned for having terrible controls. And the guy said, instead of playing it, this is going to sound not very intuitive at all, but instead of playing it like you would any other racing game for PS2 or even like MSR or anything else, like you would with how you would normally control the analog stick, like left to right, push the analog stick forward as far as it will go forward, and then roll it left and right across the top of the circular bit of plastic. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's a bit difficult.
Yeah.
If you do that, Daytona USA 2001 and Vanishing Point become completely playable and pretty good games. I was enjoying it last night. So if you were trying to stitch me up, the joke's on you.
It does get better. The game gets a lot better the more you play it. It gets. I
got quite far into it, and I do like the stunt mode as well, which is quite cool. We have to like pop the balloons and things. That was quite cool. But that's a really good tip, actually, Ross. I'll try that. But yes,
try it with Daytona as well. And
I will.
If you come across any other Dreamcast games that are difficult to control, give it a go. Maybe it will solve the issue somewhat.
Okay, there you go. That's some tips for the driving games on the Dreamcast. I think we've been waffling on long enough now, so I think we're going to draw it to a close now. Before I do, though, is there anything else that you want to mention, Mike or Ross?
Not that I can think of.
Cool.
No, I've waffled on too long already.
Excellent. Well, it just remains for me to say, thank you very much to you guys listening to this, and also to you, Mike. Thanks for joining us, and also to Ross for getting up at 7 a.m. in the morning in is it Land of the Rising Sun? Is that the correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes, the correct terminology.
Is it China? Some people say it to me like, Ross, mate, how's China going for you? I'm in Japan. How's Mao, eh? How's Mao? Mate, Mao's China, mate. I'm in Japan. Oh, same thing, isn't it?
You can obviously find more of our ramblings on our actual website, which is the Dreamcast Junkyard. That can be found at www.thedreamcastjunkyard.co.uk. You can also find us on the old Facebooks. That's facebook.com/the Dreamcast Junkyard. We also have a group, which is groups.com/Dreamcast Junkyard. We have a Twitter, which is at Sega Junkyard. Mike, you're also on Twitter at
space_turnip.
Ross, you're not on Twitter, are you?
No, you'll see me arguing on Facebook is where you'll find me.
Yes, anyone in the midst of a massive argument, you'll more than likely find Ross at the centre of it. I'm on Twitter at TomLeeC. And thank you very much for listening. And we will be back on the next episode of the Dream Pod with a very, very special guest. His name is Falco Gergis. He is the lead developer of Elysian Shadows. So, yes, we'll be speaking to him on the next episode. So make sure you tune in for that. And, thank you very much for listening. And goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Please stop this disc now.